for coming. It means a lot to all three of us. And please, during the conversation, we will make questions available at the end, but if you need coffee, just get up and do your thing. I think most of you know where the restrooms are. The first thing I want to do is, well, thank you for coming, but thank everyone for coming, but also shout out to an incredible young woman named Veronica Domingo, who was very much a part of this project. And Elsa introduced me to her about a year ago, and she helped me put the language together for Pecha, and she unfortunately had some terrible familial happenings and is not able to be here today. So we lift her up today. But I want to introduce Elsa Muñoz and Michelle Ruiz, both Southside Chicagoans, and they're here in Columbus. They love Columbus, don't you? Hey Tom, come in. We just started, come in. And really just want to briefly talk about Pecha projects really quickly. Some of you know the story that I had been thinking about a project space for a long time outside of Brandt Gallery, which was in the Short North for 15 years. And when I thought about the project space, serendipitously, I got a call about 18 months ago that said there's a small space next to your gallery, and we could cut out part of the wall and you could have access to it. And I just thought, okay, this is a little too perfect. And then, as I was thinking about what I wanted the project space to be about, which was giving artists an opportunity to really expand upon their mediums to tell their story a bit better. So how could they use the space to, like, for instance, Elsa is a painter, but how could she use the space in order to tell her narrative and her work in a more engaging kind of way? And so I decided that was what the project space would be about. I wanted it to be more culturally significant exhibits and more curatorial focused. And then I took a really incredible trip with my mother, who's here today, to where she was born in Michoacan, Mexico, in the center of the state, or the central Mexico, the center of the country. And it was in this moment, I was with my cousins, and I was in this town square, and there was a beautiful ceremony of the Putupecha indigenous tribe, of which we descend on my mother's side. They are an indigenous tribe that have been there for about 600 years. And I don't know all the folklore, but apparently they were the only tribe to have defeated the Aztecs. So we come from a long line of strong individuals. Yes. So anyway, when I was in the town square, and I'll try to be short here, I saw this incredible festival, and it really struck me as this intersection of art and culture. And there were beautiful headdresses. If you follow us online, you can see a lot of the visual imagery, beautiful headdresses, the textiles of which were embroidered, the music, the dancing. It was an auditory and visual feast. And it wasn't until I got back to Columbus that I realized what I had envisioned, what I saw there was what I envisioned here. And so I thought, okay, I'm not going to call this Putupecha Projects. No one will be able to pronounce it. So we just shortened it to Pecha. And when I thought about the inaugural exhibition, there was no question that Elsa would be the first artist that would show here. Her work is so much about nature, destruction, renewal, through these paintings. And when you hear the stories of how she came to this body of work, I think you'll be pretty blown away. But I have felt like Pecha Projects has been my heart's clarity. I've been in the arts for 2 decades, and it feels like a healing space for me. And Elsa's work very much, I think, has a healing element to it. So enough about that. Let me just quickly tell you how I met Elsa, which again was kind of serendipitous. I was traveling to Chicago, and I happened to be talking to a Columbus painter, Christopher Burke, who has worked at Brandt Gallery now. And he said, you know, if you're in Chicago, you should try to meet with an artist named Elsa Muñoz. And I said, okay. So I looked at her work, And then I called her, and I think she was a little bit like, who are you? And you were so kind to let me come to your studio. And I'm telling you, she probably wanted me to leave, because after 2 hours, I was so fascinated with her work, and I think we just connected somehow. And there was this beautiful painting of a controlled burn, and I know who is the collector now. In fact, he came to the gallery 3 times to see it, and then when he finally decided to acquire it, he hugged me on the street. And he was here last night, which was lovely. So I said to her, as we talked in her studio, and that's the best place to be with an artist, in the studio, I said, would you consider showing these in Columbus? And I think she can talk about what that conversation was like, but we were so fortunate to show her Controlled Burn series in 2022 in Columbus, one of which is in the office there. So I'm going to turn this over to Michelle Ruiz, the curator of all of this beautifulness, and you can talk a little bit about how you got to meet Elsa, and then we'll dive into Elsa's work.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
What a beautiful introduction, and thank you for having us in this beautiful space. I would love to share a little bit about how, Elsa and I crossed paths. I was working at an art consulting firm called Gallery 1871, and I was there for about 10 years in total, but during that time, I came across her work online while I was conducting an art search. And I admired her work from afar for about a year before we actually crossed paths. And that was when we were at it was a Latino art practitioner, like, social gathering. And I immediately recognized her, and I remembered, her story from the bio that I read. And we had both grew up in the same neighborhood, which is called Little Village. It's a southwest neighborhood in Chicago. And not a lot of people grow up in that neighborhood. It's kind of rough, not a lot of green or safe spaces. So I felt, in my heart, I knew that she knew what, personal struggles you might experience in a neighborhood like that. So when I ran into her, I'm like, Elsa. And I'm like, I would love to, I would love to see your work, in person. So shortly after that, in-person greeting, we scheduled a visit, and it was at her home studio at that time, and that was my first time connecting with the artist so deeply. So at that time, I was looking at her Control Burn series, which Michelle mentioned that there's one in her office sitting there, and that was the first time I learned about wood fires. So these are controlled burns to, kind of burn down the plant life to regenerate, the soil. These are healthy fires that are basically necessary and conducted by land practitioners. And I was at that moment in my life, I was going through a lot. My grandparents were declining in regard to their health, and it was just a sad moment. But it was a grieving moment for me. And so this was my first time actually crying at a studio visit, which never happens. I'm like, it just Elsa, she's a very spiritual person, and that comes through her work. And so it was just like, at the end of that, the fire though, like, this beautiful regeneration happens. And that was such a beautiful thing. Like, there's always a silver lining, that we talk about. And whenever I have conversations with Elsa, she's like, well, what is the lesson here? And what is the, there's always some beauty and some, brighter light that they end with this conversation. Yes. So that's how we met. And how Botánica, Apokalíptika came about was so naturally after the Control Burn series. What happens after the control burns, or what happens after a fire, And now we're talking about wildfires and what happens after that. So, like, she continued on that thread of, that it was a natural, I think, evolution, of storytelling. So now we're here with this new body of work, and I know we'll delve in a little more about that, but it was just a natural step for this new body of work that you are seeing, in this space.
So, Elsa, do you, I know we want to talk about this series, but do you want to, for me, it's fascinating to know that this is, follows the controlled burns, but when I met you, you had been working on the controlled burns for 10 years and not showing them. And that comes from a very significant place when you were a child. Can you talk a little bit about the controlled burns, and then we can move into this?
Yeah, sure. So I'll explain that growing up in Little Village, we have no access to green spaces. So the way that I entered into nature was through poetry. So like around 4th grade, I remember getting like my first like big English literature book, and it was full of nature poetry. And that was like a little entry point into personal salvation, to be honest. And so that was my formation, was just like an entry point through poetry. And then in 3rd and 4th grade, we scheduled through my school a field trip to a nature preserve. And I thought, finally, like I'll get to see a forest for the first time in my life. And it just so happens that we get to that forest and it has just undergone a controlled burn. So what I saw was, to my eyes, destruction, right? So immediately the forest guide then shares that a controlled burn is actually necessary, and it's medicinal, and it's about regeneration. And at that moment, I found that such a beautiful and necessary metaphor that I brought home with me, because our neighborhood is really rough and it's violent, and there were other things going on in my household. So to bring back that metaphor that destruction isn't final, that something that can look like where there is no hope, there will be rebirth. So I bring back that metaphor with me, and I'm like 9 years old. So fast forward to going to art school and learning how to paint and a lot of other life experiences. And the very first thing after I graduated school, I'm like, what do I want to paint now? Like now no one's telling me what to paint. So I'm like, I want to paint a controlled burn. So that was 2009, I painted my first controlled burn. And shortly thereafter, I got like my first gallery. And I remember bringing that painting to the gallery, and she was like, don't do this. She's like, what am I gonna sell this to? Like, there's no way. She's like, all she saw was destruction. So this is where we get into conversations around Western ways of thinking, like this very binary way of thinking about this is either good or bad, right? And I'm interested in indigenous ways of thinking, where there is always medicine even in destruction. There's always medicine, there's always a lesson, especially in nature. This is the way nature functions. It is never binary. So yeah, where do we go from there?
Well,
I think we kind of...
Yeah, no, I know. We're maybe not following the...
Yeah,
it's okay. It's okay. So you worked on these paintings for 10 years, and then we did the studio visit, and I had asked you to show them in Columbus, and you agreed, but you had said, I want to show a complete series. And I don't think you were done with that series. No. So you worked on that for Columbus, and we had an incredible reception to that series. People in Columbus really loved that series.
I think
We sold a lot of it.
Absolutely.
Like 80% of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I saw the same thing. I mean, I had a life-changing illness in 2018, and I had met you after that, and I think I very much connected with the things burning down in order for regrowth to happen, for rebirth. And I think you were on the cusp of maybe leaving the art world a bit, right? And so in some ways, I think we were kind of brought together in a way. And then we can fast forward, but you started working on this series, The Fire Followers, and then when I had reached out to you about Pecha Projects, you said, absolutely, and then you worked on this series. And then how did you bring Michelle into the mix?
This was such an easy decision.